Hello and welcome to another program on Law and Order. The program that educates you on an area of law that is important to you every week with an expert. And this week we thought we'll pick another topic that is important to you, a topic that might come into handy to any of you who are married or sometimes even if you're not married. We're talking of divorce and family law. And my expert guest on this subject today is Kaushalya Navarathne, who has a wide experience in divorce cases as well as family law matters among his other area of practice. Kaushalya is also the Secretary-elect of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka. Kaushalya, thank you very much for joining us with your busy schedule. How are you feeling today?
Thank you very much, Chanakya. Thank you very much for inviting me. I consider it to be a great honor and a privilege to be on your program.
Honor is mine to have you here.
Thank you.
Let's start off with the obvious question. Divorce, which is, if I may say, we see the statistics increasing, which probably is not a good thing. What are the, I won't go for the reasons later, but what are the grounds a Sri Lankan person can get a divorce?
Yes, Chanakya, it's a very important area because as you correctly pointed out, the number of divorce cases are increasing.
Yeah.
If I may just take a few minutes from you.
Right.
Especially in Colombo, we were compelled to set up a separate courthouse to deal with the family matters, and especially the divorce cases. If you come towards courts, you would see the number of matters which are taken up each and every day. Now, all 5 days, we have the court is functioning, and more than 50 odd cases are being taken up in courts, so which is not a good thing. And I would say, and it's my personal opinion, it's becoming a kind of a social issue. So and I'm so grateful that you have picked this topic today in this special program. And if I just go back to the main the areas where based on which that you can obtain a divorce, and mainly if I just go through take you through the General Marriage and Divorce Ordinance. And there are mainly 3 counts on which that you can obtain a divorce. Mainly, as we all know, the malicious desertion. Malicious desertion, of course, is of counts. That malicious desertion and the constructive malicious desertion. If I elaborate a little on that point, the desertion, malicious desertion, is established, or rather, we have to adduce evidence to show that the guilty party, with the intention of deserting the innocent party, must leave what is called the matrimonial residence. Right. This constitutes malicious desertion. I said there is 2 limbs in desertion. One, the other part is the constructive malicious desertion. Constructive malicious desertion is it constitutes, or rather, you can establish by adducing evidence to show, in view of the conduct of the guilty party, the innocent party has to leave the matrimonial residence. So that constitutes the constructive malicious desertion. The second ground is adultery. During the subsistence of the marriage, if one party commits adulterous activities with another person, it may be the man or woman, of course, that constitutes the malicious, the adultery. Adultery means not holding hands or rather giving a kiss is not adultery. Adultery is something more than that. So therefore, that you have to have even the burden of proof is slightly different from a normal civil action. Civil action, as we know, the burden of proof is not beyond reasonable doubts. It's balance of probability.
Yeah.
So, but when it comes to adultery, it's little more than the balance of probability. You have to have little more evidence than balance of probability. That's in order to establish adultery. The third ground is the importance. That at the time of the marriage, always remember, it's not subsequent. Subsequent to the marriage, if someone has become important, that's not a ground for a divorce. The person who contracts the marriage must be important at the time of the marriage. Those are the grounds on which, according to Sri Lankan law, you can obtain a divorce.
Right. Very succinctly put, but tell me now, a person who wants to file, these cases are filed in the district court, right? What is the basic procedure of filing?
Yeah, basically, if a person wants to get a divorce, whether it's a man or a woman, that means the plaintiff or a defendant, there is a slight exception that has been set out in the Civil Procedure Code, unlike in some other civil action. When it comes to the divorces, either the plaintiff or a defendant can institute the action where the defendant or the plaintiff resides. That's important to know.
Right.
Of course, the jurisdiction is vested with the district courts.
Resides means, this is a question, has to be the place where you had your matrimonial house, or can it be any place that person resides?
So it's got to be, now for instance, if a person who lives in Kandy, maybe for the purposes of his the work, that he might reside in Colombo, that place is not considered to be the place of board. You have to have your matrimonial residence, place where you permanently reside. So that's where it's according to law, that place considered to be the place of board, and where the jurisdiction can be invoked.
Right. Okay. But what if that person has to go due to the first one of the two limbs, malicious decision or constructive malicious decision, and you leave the matrimonial home because it's impossible for you to stay there, and then the person lives as a parent or in an apartment or with a brother or sister or a friend, then where can the person file?
Yeah, so that's very important. So that's why then at the time of the institution of action, the particular person or the plaintiff must permanently reside in a particular address. So practically what happens is, now for instance, if the matrimonial residence was in Kandy, and thereafter, as you correctly pointed out, due to some reason, if that person is going to be in Colombo permanently, maybe with the parents, the brother or someone else, or maybe on rent, so that place could be considered, or rather construed to be the permanent place of board, where the jurisdiction of the District Court of Colombo can be invoked.
Right. Now, about adultery also, people have lots of questions. We'll say somebody gets married to a person and discovers later this person has committed a lot of adultery beforehand. And that character of that person is not something that you expect to live. Now, can this be used in any form to be plugged into any of those grounds of adultery to get a divorce?
Yeah, that's very important. That's why I pointed out, Chanakya, the adultery got to be subsequent to the marriage.
Not the previous ones.
Not the before the marriage, if she has had contacted, or rather if she has committed any adulterous activities prior to the marriage, is not a ground on which that you can obtain a divorce here.
There is a ground called irreconcilable differences in certain countries. We don't have that ground.
It's time for the Warriors to stand up. The 74th Singer Bradby Shield 2018. First leg at Royal College Sports Complex, 21st April from 3:30 p.m. onwards. Live and exclusively on Rupa Vahini. Brought to you by Singer, Trusted Excellence.
Right. Now, there's another, this is probably law or not, people's perception that when that I am not giving you the divorce. Husband files a divorce and the wife says, I can stay without giving you the divorce. Now, is this true? Why is there a concept like this in society?
No, of course, I think it's a wrong notion in the minds of the people. If a person who can come to court and adduce evidence to substantiate in one of the grounds on which he is seeking a divorce against maybe the wife or the husband, if that is proved on balance of probability, as I indicated to you earlier, surely the court will grant you the divorce. And just it's where this is, the court does not need, or they don't require the consent of a party, because according to our law, the consent divorces are not permitted. So even consent if someone, obviously, so what happens is, Chanakya, what practically happens in our courts is, the moment the divorce is filed, other party comes and file what is called the answer. They always object to the grounds, or the grounds on which that they are seeking the divorce. So in that circumstances, obviously when you adduce evidence that you can substantiate to issues, certainly you can obtain a divorce. So therefore the consent of the party, whether the party says that I'm not going to give the divorce or not, is immaterial. I think it's a kind of a wrong notion in the minds of our people.
Right. Now, I have another question, but before that I want to see about the properties of divorce. Now, how is generally property is distributed, which you have accumulated during your lifetime, or which belongs differently to you and your spouse, how is it that divided in a divorce case? Or
Yeah.
does it depend on the circumstances, or who has the fault, or what?
Yeah, so that's a very important area where the courts are giving a lot of thoughts into it. Because if you analyze the provisions of the Civil Procedure Code, there are certain provisions that with regard to the settlement of the property. But we don't have a real a law relating to that. But of course, there is a separate statute, the Married Women's Property Rights. Then there are the statutes like that. But as far as the divorce actions are concerned, depending on the circumstances, for instance, when a husband, if all the properties are in the name of the husband and are subsequent to the divorce, and the wife does not have any place to stay, the children have no place to stay, then depending on the circumstances of each and every case, the wife or the husband can seek an order from court to get the property transferred into their name. So practically, let me just tell you what happens is, now if the wife who doesn't have sufficient means to live there after the divorce, especially a place to stay, if the husband has a place to, maybe one or two houses, then what we do in courts is we seek an order directing the husband to transfer the property either in the name of the wife or the children. So, there are instances where court has, based on evidence, the court has granted that relief.
Okay, we'll say the wife doesn't have sufficient means to live if everything is belong to husband, but this is a case filed by husband for adultery. So the matrimonial fault, if I may use that term, is wife's. Still, can you get this?
No, certainly, if you have children, because it's always remember, just because that you are guilty of a matrimonial fault, it does not mean that you have to be destitute.
Right.
So, depending on the circumstances, and the court will consider the circumstances and grant sufficient relief to the wife.
Right. That is even with or without children. You mentioned about the children.
Yes, even with or without children,
right.
Because of course you have to adduce evidence to substantiate
that you
the
don't have
husband has
sufficient means.
and
If the order is not reasonable, but what she got, still she doesn't, for some reason, can we sort it out in appeal?
Yes, certainly.
Yes.
So, depending on the facts and the circumstances, there is a appellate procedure. You can appeal against any order or a judgment passed by the original courts. Certainly, that can be a challenge in the higher courts.
Right. Now we come to children's custody. What is the role relating to children's custody in Sri Lanka, and how does it work?
Yeah, it's a very important area, Chanakya, because if you analyze our court systems and the procedures and practically what happens in court, as you are aware, the custody, the upper guardians of minor children is with the district courts. That earlier on we say the family court. Now the jurisdiction is vested with the district courts. So district courts is the upper guardian. Depending on the circumstances, again I must say that these are legal jargons which we use all the time. Depending on the facts and circumstances, the court will decide who is the fit and a proper person to get the legal and a physical custody. That's how it happens. Okay. But at the same time, because that application has to be made to the district courts. Now we all know that the person who's practicing the Islam, and there is a separate law relating to their divorces. But when it comes to custody of children, that is vested with the district court. So that's how. And in case if any person who wants to get the legal and physical custody of a child, or a minor child, that means a person who's below 18 years of age, then of course that application got to be made to the district court.
Right. Now, you mentioned the fit and proper parent will get the custody. What is the yardstick of judging a fit and proper person?
Yeah, that's of course again depending on the facts. Like if the person is a drug addict.
Right. So character?
Of course, the character is very important. Yeah. It's very important. For instance, like sometimes the minor child would be a girl, where the father is seeking custody of the physical custody of the child. Physical custody means the child is going to live with that particular person. Of course, always the access will be granted to the mother. But then in that circumstances, it's very important to consider the character of the person. If the person is a drug addict or living in adultery, is committing any other the wrongful activities or engage in any other fraudulent activities, surely the court will take cognizance of those matters into consideration prior to an order on custody being made.
Given the situation, one person's all these bad qualities are there, but that person is the person who has money, whereas the other spouse does not have sufficient means to look after, but that person's character is not flawed like this. Where will the court?
No, obviously, like it's not a question of how much money you have in your banks when it comes to the consideration.
Yeah.
When it comes to the question of the custody of a child.
Right.
Custody means it's a best interest, but that is the yardstick. You look into the best interest of the child. Who is the fit and proper person who can look after the best interest of the child? So that's
So
the
the best
yardstick.
interest of the child does not mean the ability to support the child with best education,
Yeah, obviously.
best lifestyle, everything?
So then what happens is, that's why the law provides that you can seek maintenance.
Right.
Then you can maintain the person who's the best and the fit and a proper person. Let's say the mother who does not have sufficient means, surely she is well entitled in law to make an application for the custody, maybe the physical and legal custody both, but certainly she can file an action to get maintenance from the father.
Yeah, so the fit and proper person with the unflawed character and good qualities, virtuous person will get the custody, and if the other person has bad person has the money, he will have to make maintenance.
Yes, certainly. That's how it happens. Of course, I must tell you, Chanika, I must add a little more to this, because I discussed certain the principles.
Yes.
I mean, not going into much details, but of course, even a person with a bad character, even let's say the husband has committed a murder and is in jail, but he's entitled to have access to the child.
Yeah.
Always remember that.
Yes.
It's very important. Sometimes you feel just because the husband has committed adultery, and the wife says, no, I'm not going to give you access, I'm not going to allow you to see my children because you are an adulterer and you are a person with a bad reputation. But the law does not allow that. Of course, law provides provisions even for that person to have access to the minor child, because law expects that especially when it comes to minor children, they need the support and the company of both the parents. So that's how it happens.
Okay. I interviewed on the same subject one lawyer, and I asked what is in his experience, what is the prevalent reason for divorce? And we all know this lawyer. He said, mother-in-law's interference. Is your answer going to be the same for that, or is it going to be different?
No, I don't think so.
Not necessarily. What is the main reason for divorce in Sri
main
Lanka?
reasons like the sins of late, if you analyze it, lack of tolerance. Lack of tolerance may be one of the main reasons that has developed, or rather the issues between the husband and the wife. And you would appreciate, like if you might see, you must have come across, you yourself being a lawyer, if you come to courts even for a small issues, for instance, sometimes the husband asks the wife to prepare a cup of tea, and the wife is not in a mood to prepare the cup of tea, and then they just get into a little bit of argument, and end of the day they come and end up in the chambers of a lawyer to get a divorce. So that's the second main ground is incompatibility. And we have seen they just easy to make contacts, and they don't really understand, and they don't have an understanding of each one's feelings and their likes and dislikes. So they just contract the marriage not knowing the person and not really having a kind of understanding between the parties. So the moment you start living under one roof, then only the problem starts.
Yeah.
So
it would be correct to say lack of commitment due to being more selfish?
Yeah, that's of course I would say definitely yes, because you would see like the present day and context, people are more on the kind of, they are just giving their main priority to their work. Self-rights, yes. Their work. Yes. So in that context, because this is a marriage, is a very sacred thing where you have a lot of commitments, you need a lot of understanding, you need a high level of tolerance. Maybe like due to the present day demands. The moment you lack one of those aspects, certainly you can't.
It's time for the Warriors to stand up. The 74th Singer Bradby Shield 2018. First leg at Royal College Sports Complex, 21st April from 3:30 p.m. onwards. Live and exclusively on Rupavahini. Brought to you by Singer, Trusted Excellence.
Okay, with your experience of nearly 2 decades of practice in law, in divorce and matrimonial law in Sri Lanka, one of the main complaints we have from clients is that the courts take so long and consent divorce is technically not permitted, although we tend to get around at some time. What would you like to see changed, Kaushalya, in divorce and matrimonial law in Sri Lanka?
Yes, certainly that is one of the main things that we have taken into our consideration. Even the Bar Association has made several representations, because certainly, as you correctly pointed out, even at the commencement of the discussion, I said the divorces can be obtained on 3 counts, and the high level of burden of proof has taken so much of time. And sometimes you file action when you are in the when you are, like, your age may be around 25, 26. By the time you get the divorce, you are in your late 40s.
Yeah.
I mean, that has been a real issue or a concern for our system, because the people are losing confidence in our system, they lose their faith in our system. Therefore, I feel that one of the main thing is that you have to have, one thing is you have to introduce certain grounds on which, if parties they have decided that the reconciliation is beyond reconciliation between the parties is beyond the reach, then of course certainly we have to have some system where we can allow people to get a divorce on a sort of an easy manner rather than going through a protracted trial. At the same time, the court system also must be revamped to cater to this situation. Otherwise, it's going to be a very big social issue in the near future.
Right. Kaushalya, Navarathne, thank you very much for those very insightful and very valuable thoughts on a very important subject, divorce and matrimonial law. Thank you for joining Law and Order
Thank
today.
you, Chanak. It's indeed a great pleasure to be with you here.
You're welcome. And that's Law and Order for you today. We'll join you next week at the same time for another program on Law and Order. And if you miss our shows, you can go to our site, channeli.lk, and drop down menu, pick Law and Order, and you can watch our shows all over again. Today's subject was divorce and matrimonial law. My guest was Kaushalya Navarathne, experienced attorney in this area as well as Secretary-elect of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka. I'll see you next week. Have a good weekend and good night.